We were the guinea pigs.
It's wonderful for fireproofing, fire retardant. The problem with asbestos is it kills you.
If you don't take that precautionary step, that's where you get into trouble.
There is no safe level of exposure to asbestos.
We didn't have a choice. Nobody told us.
This is your health. This is your family's health. You need to be careful.
I hope that some guy that's not driving a car very carefully hits me and kills me instantly so I don't have to suffer.
Hello, I'm Michael Russo. The dictionary defines asbestos as either of two incombustible, chemical-resistant, fibrous mineral forms of impure magnesium silicate. You ask people on the street what they think it is, you get something very different.
Isn't the stuff you put in the walls, doesn't that have asbestos in it?
Asbestos is pretty much related to cancer, is what I think about it.
It's in the walls of some of the buildings, and it's not good.
Asbestos is a fiber. It's natural. It's something you actually mine from the ground. It's been used pretty much forever. Go back 2,500 years. The ancient Greeks used it for cloth. Later, the Romans used asbestos in their building materials. They saw asbestos as a wonder fiber. They weren't alone. In the United States, asbestos started being used everywhere in the early 1900s. Its use peaked during World War II and on up into the 1970s.
It's got incredible tensile strength. It's wonderful for fireproofing, fire retardant.
It's strong, durable, lightweight, flexible, heat and chemical resistant, it's easy to mine, and it's relatively inexpensive.
So you have this wonderful natural fiber that has so many different uses, so many different ways to improve our lives. But a scientist found out later, while it's improving your life, it may also be killing you.
The EPA says that there is no safe level of exposure to asbestos.
Asbestos, if left alone, is not a problem.
So generally speaking, even if you do have asbestos materials in your house or in your office, which certainly, especially in these older buildings, there are quite a lot of asbestos-containing materials. If you leave it alone, then you're going to be fine. It's the disturbance of the asbestos-containing materials that allows it to become airborne. That's what leads to the hazards.
When the materials break down either by some kind of disturbance activity like construction or by natural deterioration, they can release small respirable airborne fibers, and these small fibers can penetrate deep into the lung and cause disease. The main diseases are asbestosis, which is a scarring of the air sacs in the lungs, and the development of cancer. And the development of cancer is greatly increased if it's associated with cigarette smoking.
There has been a series of attempts to ban asbestos through the years with limited success. But many U.S. manufacturers don't bother making products with it anymore because of liability concerns. Still, asbestos is used in products like brake pads or products made in many other countries. Many countries that export their products to the United States.
No, asbestos isn't banned. There's certain materials that aren't in use anymore, so you won't find things like acoustic ceilings put in roughly after 1978. But you can still find it in automotive products like brakes. Pretty common still to find in roofing materials like asphalt.
Okay, so where is it? If you live in an older home, chances are it's in your attic, linoleum floors, roof tiles, or anywhere there's insulation. Again, if left alone, it is usually okay. Disturb it, rip it up, tear it out to remodel, and you may have problems. This video will look at 3 different groups of people who would likely come into contact with asbestos and its rules and regulations. They're homeowners and renters, builders and contractors, and construction workers. A quiet day in Rancho Bernardo. A few steps up the walkway, a realtor makes a house call. George Young is the realtor, spends a lot of time doing this.
You notice one of the things about this home right away, the high ceilings.
As in this demonstration, taking a potential client from living room to kitchen
What are some of your initial thoughts when you walk into this area?
to family room.
One of the things you notice right away is the fireplace.
And while the discussion usually goes from crown molding to creative financing,
The primary thing that I do is assist people in the process of buying and selling homes.
you might want to ask about something else, asbestos. It doesn't happen that often.
I've never actually had a client specifically ask me about asbestos. A seller has to disclose to any potential buyer all known material facts about the property. But the important thing to remember is a seller may not be aware that asbestos is in the home. So in that case, then the seller would not disclose to the buyer about the asbestos.
Which would be an important factor in an older home. The age of the home is the key. This house was built in the early 1990s. It's probably all right.
However, if you've got a house that's built prior to the 80s, then you want to be careful. There are certain products that are likely to have asbestos, and in particular the popcorn ceilings, some of the flooring and the like. And what we would say is just be careful.
And being careful, not only when you're buying or renting, but say you're in the home already and you want to remodel. You want to tear out the kitchen, maybe change the bathroom. It pays to do it right.
Investigate whether the building materials contain asbestos or not. So you would hire somebody to come out and collect samples of the suspect building materials and have them tested at a certified lab to see whether they contain asbestos or not. If they do, then you need to follow certain protective practices in the removal of the products.
If you are going to be removing materials, if you're going to be remodeling, getting rid of that old popcorn ceiling, it's very wise to have it checked out first. Call an asbestos consultant, ask to have a sample taken.
Asbestos is pretty easy to deal with. It's not that much of a danger as long as you know where it is and how to treat it. Not much of a danger just because you have it sitting inside your house. The trick is you got to know if you have it or not.
And that's where people like Kay Best come in.
Hi.
She's a certified asbestos consultant at a home in El Cajon, demonstrating what she does best.
We're walking into the kitchen, and I can see right now this floor is new. The floor has been redone. There's really no samples to collect here. The homeowner's done renovation already.
If you're looking to remodel and you know the home has been there a while, you need to make sure there's no asbestos. People like Kay can take a few minutes, walk around, check the floors, check the walls, open doors.
Okay, here we have a hall closet. This is where their furnace unit is. This has definite material that I want to sample. It's sprayed on acoustic ceiling material.
You need to scrape some off and get it tested. So Kay gets ready. Gloves, bags, respirator.
I'm going to go ahead and wet this area with water, just enough to get it damp. Once the sprayed on acoustic is damp, it actually comes off real easy. It's a very thin layer. So once it's damp, there's not going to be any fiber release. I can go ahead and scrape. What I want is about 2 tablespoons of material that I'm going to collect right here. So it's damp, it's not releasing any fibers. Now I'm going to fold this piece of paper and funnel it into this Ziploc bag. And there I have my sample.
And she'll go outside too. Things like old stucco can have it. Another sample. Also old roofing material. How much does it cost? Lots of variables, but figure a couple $100. Once collected, Kay takes it to a lab to get analyzed. And people like Janet Chase get paid to make the call as to whether it has asbestos.
I've got a nice group of fibers right now, so I have to check off certain optical properties. And if all these things align, it's asbestos. So there is no question whatsoever.
And in this case, it turns out asbestos is in that furnace closet. If the owner wants to remodel, it'll need to be removed by a professional. Something to think about if you're in the market for an older home.
Your realtor is an expert in the transaction. Your realtor has expertise in the process of buying and selling real estate. But your realtor does not have expertise in identifying asbestos.
As a homeowner, you know what you're supposed to do. Check before you wreck. But what if you're the company hired to do the wrecking? Contractors must follow the rules. If not, you could be endangering your life or the lives of your workers, not to mention getting hit with a lot of penalties. Dana Logsden is a roofer, been doing it since he was 12.
Roofing and waterproofing.
Likes talking shop.
Underwood shingles is usually what's called skip sheeting. That means you have a 1x4 every 8 inches, so you have a 4-inch gap every 8 inches, or 1x6 every 12 inches, so you'd have that 6-inch gap.
But one roofing job has left a big gap in his bottom line.
So far, I spent about $45,000 in fines, attorney's fees.
So what happened? This hotel roof job in Del Mar looked pretty routine. Rip off the old wood shingles, put on concrete tiles, like he had done on other job sites. But he found an unusual rosin paper under the shingles on one group of buildings. Thought it was strange for this roof type, but started tearing it off anyway. Turns out that paper had asbestos in it.
They came out and said, hey, we think this is asbestos-based. And we said, no, I don't think so. We've never seen anything like this, as well as this building was built after a time that they could use asbestos in building.
Most of the time, I think those result from people not doing the survey to begin with. They don't know what they're dealing with, and so by mistake they get into it and start disturbing the materials. That's where we see the biggest violations and the biggest health concerns.
The law does require that a survey be done prior to disturbing asbestos. In particular, if you've got older materials, again, prior to the 1980s, you've got insulation or you've got that popcorn ceiling or some of those types of materials, the law actually presumes that some of those contain asbestos. And the burden is on the contractor to disprove the presence of asbestos.
As a professional, they expect us to be held to a higher standard.
And that standard is doing it right. Go south, a large old apartment building near Balboa Park. The owner wants to do some major structural work on it, but the owner did a survey. Turns out a crawl space between the ceiling and roof is loaded with asbestos. It's got to come out. An asbestos contractor is called.
And depending on what they find out, it may require that it be taken out according to the procedures that we require. And in that case, it would provide us with a written notification so we come out and respond to that.
And that's where Jared Ogden comes in. He's an inspector with the county's Air Pollution Control District.
So I've got a good seal on the mask and I'm ready to do my inspection.
And what he'll be inspecting is the removal process. Is the contractor doing it right? Remember, asbestos-containing material that's been disturbed can be a hazardous waste. Often the work area must be sealed off. Vacuums to suck out the air and filter it must be working, and you must dispose of it properly.
They've got all their asbestos-containing materials wrapped inside a double-layered plastic. And I'm looking for a couple things. One, to make sure that they have the appropriate warning labels here, which they do. This is great. I'm also looking to see that they're keeping the material wet. And if you look in, you can see that there's moisture in the bags. That's a good sign. That means that they're wetting the material as they're removing it. This is great. They got it taped off really well. There's no punctures in this. And I just want to make sure that there's no loose debris or asbestos fibers that could be coming out of the workspace into the public here. They've got a good seal going to their filter.
This has been like this 2 months. Yeah, real attractive for a hotel to have this.
And back at the hotel, roofer Dana Logsden waits for the asbestos removal company to get rid of it, waits to do the roof work, waits to get paid, waits to see how much this whole thing is going to cost him. Make you a better roofer?
I think I wouldn't say a better roofer. I mean, unfortunately, I'm very confident, and fortunately, in that area, I feel that, you know, I'm extremely good at what I do. It makes me a more aware roofer.
More aware through asbestos training courses for him and some of his staff, so he'll know how to do it right the first time and never have to go through this again. We know asbestos is dangerous and we don't want it around. That's a given. But there's a group of people out there who sometimes have no choice but to be around it. Construction workers. Just like contractors, construction workers need to follow the rules and also know their rights. At a union office in Los Angeles County, it doesn't take long to find somebody touched by asbestos.
Well, I first started putting on asbestos in the late 50s, early 60s.
Cesar Ramirez installed many types of asbestos on everything from piping to boiler systems.
Amosite, crocodiolite, what was the other one? Actinolite.
Now 66, Ramirez has a wall full of training certificates.
You guys ready with that?
He teaches young construction workers the do's and don'ts to make sure history doesn't repeat itself.
Your hands were very rough. They would cut up pretty easily because it sucked up all the liquid in your hands. Generally, it really bothered your eyes. Then, of course, we had no protection of any kind. We just said, well, that's the way we got to work with it.
In 2002, Ramirez got the news from his doctor he had dreaded. He has asbestosis, the scarring of the lungs, scarring caused by airborne asbestos fibers. Breathing starts getting more difficult with time until one day breathing stops.
Very scary after seeing the way my father-in-law died with it, because my father-in-law was in the trade.
It ain't going to bother me. When it does, I'll deal with it. And when it does happen is when the scary part kicks in.
Tom Gutierrez heads up the Asbestos Workers Union local for Southern California, a local that he says loses one member each month from asbestos-related diseases. What he sees, he doesn't like.
I would be reduced down to 90 pounds, and it's almost nothing. Then you're on a lung. You almost want to pray to God that you do die, because you're grasping for breath that isn't even there. Your lungs are so scarred that you can't breathe anymore, and that you can't even brush your teeth because you're so tired that you're going to collapse.
But if you need the work, especially when you're just starting out, you'll take whatever job you can find, right? Well, the key is to not be afraid to ask questions about asbestos on the job and demand answers.
The worker has two options. One, he or she can quit, or call OSHA and let them know why they had to quit or why they got terminated.
They do have a right to contact us if they do have a concern about being exposed to asbestos. For instance, construction work, if they're going to be doing renovation type work, if they're going to be doing demolition type work, they should look out for what we would call presumed asbestos containing materials that are part of the structure.
That would be the old tile, insulation, popcorn ceilings, etc. Things that are common in remodels of older buildings and condo conversions.
Not only is it for the benefit of your workers and the public, but it's against the law, because if these contractors come in and they don't do it right and they start to pull out asbestos containing material without complying with the law, without taking the proper protections, that's a civil or a criminal matter.
Let's say the contractor does the asbestos survey and asbestos is on site. Gutierrez shows us what you, the general construction worker, should see just on a smaller scale.
They must sign in at this entrance level here. The reason why they have to sign in is to make sure when this thing is all done, they want to make sure all the workers come out. Because this is a small little scale. On a larger scale, you could be, you want to make sure you have all your workers out. That worker will enter this thing with regular street clothes, and then again change in here and put on this suit. Then he'll go through the shower room, into the equipment room, pick up his equipment, and then go into the work area right here. Once he enters this work area here, this is where he'll start removing the asbestos or the hazardous materials. This negative air machine is always on. It must be on 24 hours a day, okay, so that any fiber release at all is going to go in here.
Sounds like a lot of fuss, but remember, asbestos is a hazardous material. At your construction site, you have the right to know if you're working on something containing asbestos or if a worker close by is doing asbestos removal. Think about safeguards, chambers, negative air, protective clothing, respirator. A simple dust mask does nothing.
No one called it asbestos.
Tom shows me a video on asbestos workers in Montana, workers who didn't know the dangers 40 years ago and pay the price today.
More laws are stronger on this thing to protect the worker as long as everybody complies. If everybody plays by the same rules, we're going to be fine. If we don't, then we're going to have an epidemic in another 10 more years.
Anything that has to do with respiratory protection, make sure you take care of your lungs, because you don't have a second chance, especially with asbestos. I mean, you got it, you got it.
Homeowners and renters, contractors and construction workers all need to be careful with asbestos. It can kill you, and if you smoke, it becomes even more deadly, way more. Remember, asbestos is a hazardous material. That means there are rules for working around it and for throwing it away. You can't just put it out on the street on trash day. Undisturbed, it's fine. But if you think you may have it in your home or job site, have it tested by a licensed asbestos expert before you start work. For more information, just visit our website at sdasbestos.org. asbestosfound.org or call the county's Air Pollution Control District at 858-586-2707. Best advice? Check before you wreck. I'm Michael Russo. Thank you for watching.